Welcome back to another episode of Bible Conversations. Today we're going to be continuing our character studies and talking about Gideon. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. It's good to be able to talk about the scriptures again, as always. Yeah. And today we're going to be in Judges. Be in Judges chapter 6 and 7. And I don't know that we'll have time to go over 8, but that's an interesting story as well. But anyway, I'll kind of let you get us started off. You doing?
Yeah. Well, Judges, is always interesting because it's a very it's a war book, really similar to Joshua, in the way that you read about battles and the history buff in me really enjoys both Joshua and Judges because it's kind of like, oh, this is interesting reading about these battle strategies, reading about really how God uses his people. And just because God is on their side doesn't mean that they're just like, oh, I'll sit back and do nothing. Like they're still called to be active. They're still called to work. And then God says, when you do so, then you're going to have victory because I'm on your side. And so I really enjoy Judges. But another part that's interesting to it is that it's just a very, what's the word for, like it goes in a cycle.
Cyclical.
Yeah, cyclical. Yeah. It's a very cyclical book where Israel falls away from God. They're oppressed by nations surrounding them. The nation that's oppressing them when Gideon is raised up by God is Midian. And they're oppressed. Then God raises up a judge. Israel, the nation, turns back to God under the leadership of this judge. And then when that judge passes away, it's pretty much the next generation most of the times that falls back into serving idols, serving other gods, and they fall away again. And then once they fall away, then they're oppressed again by a surrounding nation. And so then they cry.
They just can't seem to get it right.
No,
consistently.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like, come on. By the third or fourth time, it's like, don't y'all realize what like the cycle that's happening here?
You would think.
But no, they don't realize. And so Gideon is, we find his story in chapter 6. And the beginning of chapter 6, we read about how Midian is oppressing Israel. One thing that I find interesting that kind of just describes the whole first 10 verses is actually verse 6. It says, "And Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord." That's what's happening here. That sets the stage. Verse 6 sets the stage that the people are being oppressed and they're realizing that they need help. And Gideon even vocalizes when God comes to him, asking like, why is this happening to us? When an angel of the Lord appears to Gideon to call him the very first time, in verse 13, Gideon replies, he says, "Please, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." See, even Gideon, this man that is recounted thousands of years later is, wow, he was a great judge in Israel. He turned the people back to the Lord. He even is asking, why has the Lord forsaken us? Why is he gone away? He doesn't understand the circumstances that the nation finds themselves in at the moment. Now, the way the story progresses is this angel comes to Gideon and he says that he's going to rise up Gideon. He's going to be a leader. He's going to get Israel out from under the oppression of Midian. And Gideon's first response is like, how is this going to happen? This can't happen. And he even says like, why me? My clan is the least of all clans. My tribe is the least of all tribes. And I am the least of my father's house within this clan, within this tribe. Gideon, is basically saying, I'm nobody. Yeah. Why in the world would you come to me and ask me to lead these people when I'm nothing. I'm nobody. And I think that really speaks to Gideon's humility.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting in verse 12. the angel in talking with him calls him a mighty man of valor.
Yeah.
And we see in what you're about to go over, the preceding couple of verses, that Gideon has a lot of hesitancy.
Yes,
very much so. I don't know if this is, this isn't me. You got the wrong guy. Are you sure you weren't looking for Gideon? Because I'm Gideon. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He seems to be, but the angel calls him a mighty man of valor. And so I heard from one of my mentors one time, Jared, who we've had him on this podcast before, Jared Hyatt, and he was talking about this idea. In what way was Gideon a mighty man of valor? And it doesn't seem to have been in strength of arms, but rather in strength of mind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so anyway, I think God is able to use us in just a multiplicity of ways
with whatever talents that we have, whatever personalities that we have. If we submit to God, then that's what makes us mighty.
Correct.
It's not on our own strength, especially the way that we consider strength physically. But whatever.
Just look at David and Goliath.
Exactly. Yeah, just like David and Goliath. It's whatever talents or abilities that we possess, God turns those into mighty talents and abilities. And so, but Gideon is very, very hesitant. He's very much like, I don't think I'm the right person. And so, so he says in verse 17, if now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. He's wanting to make sure, like, Lord, is this really you? And so he says in verse 18, please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you. So what we read is that he goes and prepares a sacrifice for the Lord. And he's like, just wait here. I'll be right back. I'm going to go prepare something for you to make sure it's you.
He couldn't have been right back, though, right? Because he goes and he prepares a young goat.
Oh, yeah.
Unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour, which I don't know exactly how much that is, but it's not a
about
small
22
amount.
liters.
Okay, so it's a lot. That's a lot of flour.
Yeah.
Right? So he prepares a lot of unleavened cakes, right? Yep. Then he puts it into a basket, the broth into a pot, he brings them to him under the terebinth, and then he presents it. Like, this is you take all day to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's why he's like, don't leave.
Don't leave.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I gotta go prepare something. And what's incredible is he comes back, and this is one of the awesome miracles that, when we talk about the story of Gideon, it's the fleece that he puts out in the field, the field has dew on it, but the fleece doesn't. The next morning he puts that out again. The fleece has dew, but the field does not. And we'll get to that in a minute. But this is a really cool miracle that's about to happen here that we don't study a whole lot when it comes to Gideon. So he brings his sacrifice back. He lays it on a rock, as was instructed by the angel of the Lord that he was talking with. And the angel of the Lord reaches out his staff and touches the meat that was prepared there, this unleavened bread that was set there. And when he does that, the rock that the meat and the bread is sitting on, like fire comes from the rock and consumes the meat and the bread that was there. Just like I don't know about you, but like I've never seen fire just rise up out of a rock. No. And even other miraculous things that we read about with fire is God sending down fire from heaven, whether it be on Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy those cities,
or with Elijah
on Mount Carmel when fire comes down to consume the sacrifice that Elijah had set up. But here, Gideon sets his sacrifice, his present, on this rock, and fire comes up from the rock and consumes it. And I'm just like, imagine being Gideon in this setting where you see this rock just like fire comes up from it. It's incredible. I don't know. It blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's miraculous because it's not something that would ever happen in any normal setting.
No.
And so it is obviously God that has done this. In the verse 22, I always, this word perceived, anytime that, I read it in The Woman in the Well, right? Mm-hmm. And the woman perceived that Jesus was a prophet, right?
Yeah.
Sir, I perceive that you're it's like this, right? Like this, you should have known that. And then here it says, Gideon perceived that he was an angel of the Lord. It's like, yes.
Yeah,
Gideon,
I always read
he
that
was.
the same way, where it's kind of like he realized something he should have already known.
Yes.
Like the woman at the well, she realized something she should have already known.
Should have had a V8 type thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the same type of mentality when they perceived that they should have had a V8. But Gideon's response in verse 22, "Alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." He's like, I realize who this messenger has truly come from. This angel is of the Lord.
And I just made him wait outside for me to make some food.
Exactly, yes. And so the first command he's given is not to prepare an army and go take down Midian. Gideon has realized who's calling him, and the first command is tear down the idols. Yeah. Before we get Israel out from under the oppression of Midian, we have got to right some wrongs. Yeah. We've got to fix the things that Israel got themselves into trouble with in the first place. The whole reason that they're under the oppression of Midian, the whole reason God has allowed Midian to come and oppress Israel is because they turned to these idols, because they turned to the Baals and to the Ashereth pole. And so the first command is, Gideon, tear down these idols. Yeah. And then again, we realize his little bit of timidity that he's like, okay, I'll do this. But it says in verse 27, Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord commanded him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. Yeah. And so he's doing what the Lord said. He's being faithful, but we still see
he was afraid.
The fear.
Which is really interesting. Because in verse 23, he's commanded, do not fear. Yeah. Right. And so he's, peace be to you. The Lord's saying, peace be to you. Do not fear. You shall not die. Yeah. If God tells us something, that's something we ought to believe, right?
Yeah. In other words, it's going to be okay. I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're also talking about we're people, we're humans, right? Yep. And so he has this fear. Gideon names this place where this happened, the Lord is peace. Yeah. Right. So he understood what was going on, but that night when he's given this command, like you're saying, right, to go and destroy these altars, he's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it when everybody's asleep. Yeah. I'm gonna do it when nobody knows that it's me. Yeah. Because he's afraid. He's afraid, and so again, he's timid. He's not sure of himself. Yeah. And so
which stays consistent through everything that we read about with him. And so he does this. Men of the town come out and they're like, who did this? We got to find out who did this. Yeah. They do some investigating and they find it to be Gideon. That was the one that did it.
Yeah, I'm curious how that investigation happened, how it went, who snitched, basically, right?
Yeah, well, I wonder, even sometimes, maybe did Gideon snitch on himself? Like, if they're going around and talking person to person and then they get to Gideon, were you the one that did this? I mean, Gideon, I wouldn't think would be a person to lie. Yeah. I mean, he may have been like, yeah, I did.
That was me. I tried to hide it. You guys are just too good of detectives.
Also, remember, he took 10 of his servants with him, and so one of them may have snitched. May have snitched, yeah. And so they're ready to put Gideon to death. They're like, how in the world could this happen? Yeah. And it was Gideon's dad, his father, who stood up and he said, will you contend for Baal? This is in verse 31. Yeah. Or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. So Gideon's father is basically saying, y'all worship this idol as a god. If he truly is worth worshiping, then he's going to right these wrongs himself. Yeah. If not, nothing's going to happen. Yeah.
And it says that Gideon was afraid of his family.
Yeah.
So I find that
it was an altar from his father's house.
Yeah. So I find that to be really, really intriguing that the altar to Baal comes down, and it's almost like Joash remembers because of Gideon's action. He remembers who he is supposed to serve. Yep. He remembers what he is supposed to. He remembers that he is a Jewish citizen and that he is of God. And so I think that's such a really a powerful statement, right? Like if Baal is a god, why are you fighting? Let him contend for himself. Yeah. It was his altar that was broken down. It wasn't yours.
Exactly. The people of the town are the ones that are getting upset. But it says in verse 25, pull down the altar of Baal that your father has and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. Yeah. And so it's his own father's house that has this, and then all the people of the town are like, what? We need to get angry about this. But but his father, I think you're right. He kind of had a mental
He had a come
change.
to Jesus moment.
He really did, yeah. And he was like, oh, wow, my son is kind of trying to correct my wrongs.
Yeah.
And I think he's realizing that.
Yeah.
And so from there, Gideon is now called to raise up men to go fight against Midian. It's time. This is the story that we know. When he gets the fire, the torches, the jars, and they yell, which you'll go over here in a minute. Yeah. But again, Gideon's very timid. Yeah. And he's like, okay, let me just make sure that I'm doing what God wants me to do. Let me make sure that it really is God coming to talk to me. And so in verses 36 through 40 at the end of chapter 6, he gets this fleece and puts it out in a field and asks God to make sure that there is dew on the fleece alone and the ground around it is dry, in the morning when there's dew everywhere. And it happens. Yeah. And then the next morning he's like, let me try this again just to be super, super sure. Yeah. And then the ground has dew on it and the fleece is completely dry. Yeah. And that's when he's like, okay.
All right.
Yeah, this is time.
And what I really love about, we said last week, I think, with the teens, I'm going over the Spirit and the Trinity and all that. And verse 34 here, it says, the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. Mm-hmm. So Gideon was covered with and surrounded by the Spirit of God. And so he did all these things. And then it seems, as you're talking about, right, that he got a little, even with the Spirit, right, we as people, we can still get timid and we can still have doubts and we can still have fears and all of these things. Yeah. And so I think this also goes to the patience of the Lord. I also think about Abraham asking God about Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Well, just be patient. What about 50? Yeah. What about 40? What about 30? What about 25, 20? And just keeps going down.
What about just 10?
Be patient with me, right? Yeah. And I think, man, God is so patient with us all the time. And we often, I think, take that for granted almost, because we understand, well, we all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God. Yeah. We understand that we're supposed to be sinless, but we're like, well, I mean, I know I'm trying not to sin. I'm doing my best not to sin, but it's almost like we test God's patience when we accept that sin has happened as an okay thing rather than, it's not okay at all. Yeah. Right? Like we need to be cut to the heart. We need to be just ashamed of sin.
I always, I greatly dislike that little disclaimer that we always put on a discussion where it's like, but we obviously know we fall short of the glory of God. Yeah. And it's like, yes, but let's stop using that so much as an excuse. Yeah.
That should be more of an encouragement for us to try to attain that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more so of just a fact that it's like, yes, that's what we know about us as human beings, but it's not an excuse. And there's so many times it's almost used as an excuse where it's we are trying to serve the Lord, but we know we're going to fall. Yeah. So
then it's permission to fall, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm talking about this on Sunday night, so I don't want to go too far into it now. But no, I mean, we should really view that more as a challenge. Mm-hmm. If we're being realistic about it, right? We are to become like Christ. Yeah. We are to become like the Father, and we know that they are perfect. Yep. There is no sin found within them, and so we're getting a little off track here, Gideon, but that's okay. But we are to be sinless. Yeah, that's the goal.
Even something as simple as just the way that we speak with one another, and that sort of thing is I would venture to say among people who are seasoned Christians, that is one of the biggest difficulties of sin to get over. Is just the oh man, I definitely did not treat them right. Later realizing
it's the thought process.
Yeah.
So and I'll talk about that too. I'm actually really excited about that part of it.
All right, but anyway, we'll save that for Sunday night.
Yeah. So anyway, signs of the fleece. We've gotten that. What's next? Is it my turn?
Yeah. Your turn in chapter 7, and I'll just jump in wherever I can.
Yeah. Feel free to interrupt. So we've got Gideon here, or now as he's known, Jerubbaal, right? I don't know if that's how you say it right, but basically one who contends against Baal.
Yeah, I've always said Jerubbaal, but
Jerubbaal, whatever. So this guy, Gideon, is what we're going to call him, is ready. And this is now Gideon against Midian, right? Yeah. which I think is just an awesome, we might have to make that
fantastic,
the title. So it's Gideon versus Midian, and it says the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. So this is verse 1. Then we get to verse 2, and it says, the Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many. Mm-hmm. The people with you are too many. Can you imagine the United States Army going to war and the president or the commander, whatever, says, yeah, you have too many soldiers with you. It just, we need to make it a little more, fair.
Well, and we read down in verse, at the end of verse 3 that he had 32,000 troops with him. Yeah. And the reason is because God is saying, I don't want y'all to think you're winning this on your own.
Correct.
Like, y'all left me for Baal, this piece of metal that is not even a god, and you worshipped that. I don't want you to think for a second that you're doing this on your own.
Yeah, the end of verse 2, right? Lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Yeah. Which, I think of Abigail and David. David attempting to get salvation on his own by killing Nabal and all the people of his house. And Abigail's like, no, don't do that. Yeah. God will get the vengeance. And then, 10 days later,
I think
Nabal dies.
That's the reason there's so much focus on our debt throughout the New Testament, our debt of sin, is when we realize how much trouble we have gotten ourselves in, how far we have fallen, then we realize not for a second that we're gaining salvation by ourselves.
Yes, it's not possible.
Yeah.
So we've got 32,000 people, 22,000 of them returned because they were afraid. And so verse 3, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. And so 22,000 leave. So 2/3, more than 2/3.
A little bit more than 2/3. They're left with 10,000 people.
Is afraid of fighting, which fair, right? Like you might die. You go to war, you might die. Like it's fair to be afraid. Yeah. So anyway, 22,000 return. Like, just go be with your families. 10,000 are gung-ho. They're like, yeah, I'm ready, right? Yep. And then you've got in verse 4, the Lord says to Gideon, again, the people are still too many. So you've got less than a third of the army that you originally had, and God's like, yeah, that's still way too many. So he says, take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And so basically, however they drank the water from the river was going to determine whether they would stay. Mm-hmm. And then in verse 5 at the end of it, it says, we'll just read all of verse 5. He brought the people down to the water. The Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink. So there's two different ways then that they're going to be drinking, right? Presumably what it is some will be using their hands to drink and some will not be using their hands. Mm-hmm. And I think the primary point here, and I've heard different things and I've said different things at different times, but I think the primary point here is that those who are using their hands to drink are not holding their weapon. They're not ready for war. They're not ready to fight. The ones who are lapping with their tongue, it might have their hand on their sword, right? Just as when Nehemiah, right, they were rebuilding the wall, one hand with the hammer, one hand with the spear, right? They were ready to fight. They were ready to go. So that's one interpretation that I find most probable.
One I've actually heard on the flip side of that was that those who pick up the water with their hands and then bring it up to their mouths to drink, they're keeping their eyes up and that they're aware for enemies. And so it's kind of in the same vein as like, hey, these men are the brave ones, these 10,000. Yeah. Now these 300 of those 10,000, they're brave and they're aware. Like these are the men that are truly ready to fight.
Yeah. It was the ones who lapped their tongue that were chosen, and it was 300 of them. Yeah. And so the other, and this is my own personal, I don't think it's necessarily true, but I find it slightly comical because when you think of drinking water, I don't think very many people are going to lap like a dog, right? Yeah. And so people that lap their tongue like a dog, I would imagine may not be the brightest people. Yeah. And so now you've got, not only do you have 300 men, but you have 300 men who aren't overly bright. Yeah. And God has chosen to save Israel with these people. Yeah. Right. And so I don't think that's necessarily the reason, regardless of what the reason is, what interpretation you take. God chose 300 people to take on an army, which is absolutely, it's insane. You go from 30, you're looking at 1% of the army, 1% of the capacity of the army to destroy somebody else, right?
But not only that, we read once they get ready to go attack Midian, he divides that army of 300
into
men.
three.
Into three, yeah. And so they have groups of 100 men that are stationed at different spots. And so it's like he's breaking them down even more.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So then we get to verse 9, right? The Lord said to Gideon, "Arise, go down against the camp. I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant, and you shall hear what they say. And afterward your hands will be strengthened to go get down against the camp." So guess what Gideon does?
He was afraid. So
he was afraid.
He did that, yeah.
So he went with Purah. He went down into the camp. He heard what they said. And verse 13, when Gideon came, behold, a man was telling a dream to his comrade, and he said, "Behold, I dreamed a dream. And behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent, and struck it, so that it fell, and turned it upside down, so that the tent lay flat. And his comrade answered, This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp." All right. One, how did these men know the name of Gideon? That's something that I don't fully understand. How did these Midianites know Gideon's name? Something must have happened, because he was just chosen for this. I mean, it seems like in the story, like maybe a week or two ago. It's not like it's been just this crazy amount of time. And prior to that, it's not like he was a prince of Israel. It's not like he was something special. So how did they know his name? How did they know what was going to happen? How did they know that the Lord God Jehovah was going to take over the camp with them? I don't have an answer for that. But the reality is that Gideon heard this because God wanted him to hear that. And so now Gideon, he's ready, right? It says he heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation. He worshiped. He worshiped God. It's almost that immediate, the praise that we give. Someone's been baptized. We sing a song, right? We praise the Lord. We welcome them into the brotherhood. Gideon worshiped. He says he returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand." So then he again, like you said, he splits them into 100, 100, 100. And he's got trumpets into the hands of all of them, and empty jars with torches inside of the jars. And he said to them, "Look at me and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side of all the camp and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." And so especially back then, when you were ready to march on somebody, you had a group of people, trumpet players, whose job was to play the trumpet.
Yeah, and it's just a very, very, very small portion of the entire army that's going to be blowing trumpets.
Exactly. And so you have all 300 of them. They brought trumpets to a battle, right? Yeah. That's like saying, bringing a sword to a gunfight, right? Like they brought a trumpet to a sword fight.
Yeah.
And they won. But anyway, so they all blow the trumpets, which when you're talking about in a valley, right, and you're kind of up at the top, what is that? It sounds...
And they've got surround sound, too.
It's echoing. It sounds super loud. It sounds like whatever's coming is a massive, massive army. So they go out, and then it says they smash the jars that were in their hands. And so now you see these fires go up, right? And you see the torches that were burned because you get that gas that's inside. So it's an explosion. It's making all this noise, and you hear all this shouting. And so Midian, man, waking up from... Some of them probably dead of sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And they're mortified. They're terrified because all this noise is around them. And so they're like, all right, they're here. So they just start killing one another.
Yeah.
They cannot tell friend from foe because it says that the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. Verse 22. Mm-hmm. And so who was it that defeated the Midianites? It was the Lord.
It was God, yeah. The Israelites didn't even have to fight. Like Midian defeated themselves because God was working for Israel.
Yes.
God was fighting for Israel. It really is incredible the way that when we allow God to work in our lives, when we say, okay, I'm not in this for my own glory. Yeah. I'm not in this to try to say, hey, look at what I've done.
Yeah.
But instead say, this is for the Lord.
Yeah.
Then He's going to be working on our side, and His strength is so much greater than what ours is anyways.
Yes. Yeah. So, we've got Midian is defeated, right? Gideon being the leader of them, he ends up sending messengers, and in chapter 8, he goes through, and he's, the army then actually gets to do what the army does, and it gets to, they go and they kill people. You've got two different cities, Sukkoth and starts with a P. I'm trying to Penuel. They don't give bread to the army that has been traveling and marching, and so whenever Gideon comes back, he's like, all right, you guys are going to die too, because you're going against the Lord. Yeah. So they end up dying. And anyway, so that's a lot of what Gideon is. The end of Judges 8, I don't fully understand this. He creates an ephod, and it ends up becoming like an idol for the Israelites and a snare for his family, it says. And so I don't understand why he did that. I don't understand what he had done that, like what the reason or purpose of that was. They wanted him to be king. They wanted him to rule over the people. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. My son's not going to do that. But then he created an idol. So I don't fully understand all of the rationale or any of that, but
yeah. No, I may be wrong on this, but I believe I remember what that is it's a garment.
Yes.
That Gideon has created, and so it's almost like he's doing something to pass down to his family. We have keepsakes all the time.
Yeah.
And there's tons of things that are family heirlooms that are things that remind us of our grandparents or great grandparents. Things that are passed down from generation to generation. Yeah. And I believe that's what Gideon is trying to set up here. Yeah. Almost as a memory of, when you think of me, think of what God did for me.
Yeah.
Think of how the Lord, through his strength, worked in my life. But the way that it's described is that, and all Israel whored after it. In other words, they were just being, like, they were
being people.
They were prostituting themselves to
a piece of cloth that had 1,700 shekels of gold, right? Like and it very well may have been that he was just trying to create, like, he wasn't trying to do anything nefarious or anything bad with it, right? It's very probable, especially given what he has done so far, right? The timidity that he's had.
Yeah.
But and it may have been a way as well for the people to give honor to him as they wanted to honor him. They wanted to say thank you. So it may have been, hey, just, give like an earring or something. And so all the people doing it, well, that adds up pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
But regardless of what the reason or rationale was, what ended up happening with it, not good. So that part of that goes to show, we've got to be very careful with our actions and what we choose to do. It
also shows how easily it is to
corrupt.
to corrupt and to let things take place of God.
Yeah.
I mean, that was Israel, while they were wandering, that was their whole problem, is they couldn't see God.
Yeah.
They wanted to know like that he is with us. And I think it was also when they wanted a king. It wasn't that, we just want to be like the nations around us. I think part of it, if I remember correctly, was also like, hey, we want to have a leader present here with us, visibly able to see. Yeah. Like, we know God is with us. We know that he's all around us, that he's working in our lives, and that he is omnipresent. But we still can't see him. And I think that's part of what makes it so difficult throughout the entire Old Testament. We read of Baal coming back all the time.
Yeah.
Just these idols and altars that are set up. And I think part of it is they want to see something and have something physical that they say, this is what we turn to.
Yeah. Well, and that's the same thing that Thomas did.
Yeah.
One of the disciples of Jesus.
Yeah, even Thomas, until I see his hands and feet,
I will never believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Or see his side and hands. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's how we are today. I mean, the reason that there is the Catholic Church is the way it is with the Pope is because people wanted somebody that was in charge, right? I mean, it's a very human thing. So,
yeah.
But anyway, that's all I've got for Gideon.
Yeah, no, it's a great study. Yeah. I like I said, I love the entire book of Judges.
Yes.
It's a great study to look through, and a lot of the stories are similar as far as Israel's oppressed, God raises up a judge, Israel's faithful to God, judge dies, Israel turns back to to idols, Israel's oppressed. And it just cycles that way all throughout the book. But Gideon is one of my favorite stories really because of his humility. I think that's the big difference to the other popular judge that we read with Samson. Is Samson was full of himself.
Samson's not my favorite.
It was all about Samson. And yes, absolutely, he worked for the Lord and the Lord strengthened him. But at the end of the day, Samson was like, look at me, look at my strength. And it wasn't until he lost that strength that he realized
it was God.
I'm not strong.
Yeah.
And so Gideon, on the other hand, though, he is incredibly humble. He's like, it's not about me. There's no way I'm the person that you want to raise up to save Israel. So incredible study with Gideon. A lot of things that we can take from it, and a good character study. So we just want to let y'all know if there are any other character studies you want us to explore, or really any other topic, shoot us an email, send us a Facebook message, just reach out to us however you can, and let us know what topics you would like us to address. So, as always, leave us comments and reviews, and share with your friends. Get the word out about Bible Conversations. So, until next time, thank y'all for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Bible Conversations. We want to ask if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, that you please email us at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media. We've got a Facebook page as well as an Instagram account. Our Facebook page is very simple. It's just Bible Conversations. On Instagram, it's very simple, at Bible Conversations. Look us up, like our posts, and share it with your friends.
We also have an opportunity for you to help us financially through a store via Kim's Closet. And you can find that. You can just type into Google Kim's Closet. We have a link as well that we will be posting in each of our episodes, and we just hope that you will reach out and find us and purchase a hoodie or a shirt with the logo on it, and that way you can spread the word without having to say a word. So we appreciate you. Thank you all. Have a blessed week.